Hello, everyone. It's Brother Donnie here. Welcome to Heroes of the Faith Live. You can see I got my camera to the left here. Go ahead and close myself off. Hopefully, you can hear pretty good. And this is a live one. We don't happen often, but I didn't have time to record it prior to. So, hello, everyone. How's the audio? Can everybody hear me good? Everybody hear me good. Hope you are doing well this evening, this fine Saturday. Welcome to At the Cross Community as well as Prep for Eternity Homestead as we study heroes of the faith. And what a blessing it is that we are being able to go through these heroes. Glad, good, loud, clear, very good. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started again. My name is Brother Donnie. We are going through talking about some of the various heroes of the faith. And to give you an idea about a timeline, we are on about in the 1500s, and there is a lot going on in terms of church history that impacts us today. Let me say, I forgot to say hello, everybody. Hello, Dave Reinhardt. Hello there, J&L. Hello, Sister Mary, Brother Warren. Hope you're doing well. Wonderful to see everybody. Welcome on in. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Tonight we're going to be talking about John Calvin. And I have named John Calvin the trunk of the Reformation. Now, many men and women were vital to the Reformation. But the two that really stand out that have caused more change in the world as a result of the Reformation would be Martin Luther and John Calvin. Now, I call them the trunk. That in no way negates the awesomeness of the others, because they are all awesome. So John, and you see there, I've got Jean. That's because he was French. He was born in French. We're going to see that in just a minute. So he was born in 1509. He died in 1564. To give you an idea about time frame, Martin Luther would have been about 25 years old when John Calvin was born. Now, his early life. John Calvin was born as Johann Calvin on 10 July 1509 at Noyon, a town in Picardy. Now, you'll notice the map there to the left of your screen. Picardy is up in the north part of France. This was heavily Catholic country. As a matter of fact, the entire country was just about Catholic. There was uprisings at this time. You remember now. So he was born in 1509. You'll remember that Tyndale had published some of his Bibles in 1525. Martin Luther had started to operate, I guess, about 15 years after this. So there was urgings of Reformation going on over in Europe. So he was the second of three sons who survived infancy. His mother, Jean Lafranc, was the daughter of an innkeeper from Cambria. She died of an unknown cause in Calvin's childhood, having borne four more children. Calvin's father, Gerard, had a prosperous career. He was really a lawyer, but he had a prosperous career as a cathedral notary and a registrar to the ecclesiastical court there. And again, heavily Catholic. All points that we see about Calvin in his early childhood life was that they were devout Catholics, faithful to the Catholic cause. And of course, his father worked within the Catholic Church. So they would have been well versed in Catholic dogma. Now, Gerard wanted for his sons, all three of them, Charles, John, and Anton, he wanted them to be priests. And most of the time, young men who had great minds, they would either get into the priesthood, or they would get into government service, or they would get in a legal profession. Gerard wanted for John to become a priest. And many young people did it. We don't have a ton of information about his early life, but from all indications, he had a pretty happy childhood other than his mother passing away early on. Now, his education, we have a little bit more understanding. Calvin was particularly precocious, and by the age of 12, he was employed by the bishop as a clerk and received the tonsure, cutting his hair to symbolize his dedication. Now, you've seen the pictures. I should have put a picture here. You've seen the pictures where they take a priest's head, and it looks like they take a bowl and put a bowl over top of his head and shave all that hair under the bowl, making him have a bald spot in the top of his head. That's what it's talking about here. So John Calvin had one of them bald top head haircuts, I guess you'd say. He worked for the bishop, doing odd tasks, whatever it was that the bishop needed him to do. And the entire time, no doubt, he learned more dogma of the Catholic Church. He learned how to be better Catholics, if you will. And we see that over and over in his life. I tell you, I'm going to switch y'all bear with me. I'm going to turn this Wi-Fi off on this phone to see if I can increase my Wi-Fi. I hope y'all aren't seeing any kind of degradation as a result of the lower Wi-Fi. There it goes up a little bit there. So, all right. So John Calvin was helping the bishop, and he also won the patronage of a family of an influential family at Matamoros, and through their assistance, Calvin was able to attend the College of de la Marque in Paris. Now, let me throw this in here for our understanding. Today, we see colleges and universities all over the place. This is still a time when universities, free universities is what they called them. That don't mean that it's free to go to. It means they was free from religious oversight. So this is about the time when free universities started to become more commonplace in Europe. Hey, Tinker's wife, good to see you. Talking about John Calvin. So he went and he was enrolled in the college there in Paris, and he learned Latin there. Once he completed his course, he entered the College de Montique as a philosophy student. Now, Luther was a genius, and he was his mind, he had a great mind. He took philosophy. He also studied humanism. Now, everything was rocking on good, but Gerard got to thinking, and I'm kind of taking some liberty here. Gerard got to thinking, well, maybe old Martin's not going to be able to earn enough money. So in 1525 or 1526, Gerard withdrew his son from the college and enrolled him in the University of Orleans to study law. Hey, Larry Gandy. Now, University of Orleans is on the left-hand side of your screen. It's a college, or still a college today, but it's much fancier there today. So Martin was studying law. His father believed he could make more money and would be better off as a lawyer as opposed to a priest. And after a few years of quiet study, Calvin entered the University of Bourges in 1529. And he was really intrigued by the humanists. Now, the whole time here, things were happening in Germany. The Reformation was starting to kick off. Things were taking place. And John Calvin, this whole time, was staunch against the Reformation. His associates he hung around with were against it. His family was against it. And so here you have Martin studying to be a lawyer and taking humanist classes. And humanism, and I've got the definition, was a European intellectual movement which stressed some of the classics. As a matter of fact, one of the first works that Calvin wrote was not a Christian work. It was a work on, I can't remember if it was Aristotle or Socrates, but it had to do with mercy and justice in the legal system. and he had learned Koine Greek, and that would have been a necessity for him to later study the New Testament. Now, again, keep that in your mind. He was adamantly against the Reformation. So, what little of his conversion that we don't know much. There is some speculation about when he was actually converted. Now, while in school, he had a very distasteful view of Luther and the Reformation. And he loathed a particular group that went throughout France. And this group, it was a pretty large group, all they talked about was Reformation theology, grace by faith, justification by faith alone. This group was called the Gospelers. That was the name that was given to them, the Gospelers. And because all they did was go around and talk about the gospel. Now, interestingly enough here, and I thought this was very interesting, Calvin had a friend named Peter Robert, who was a pro-Reformation person, believed in the Reformation. Now, for Calvin, this presented quite a problem because if Calvin was going to do his duty, he would turn his friend in. But Calvin knew that if he turned his friend in, that would surely be the death of him. With that being the death of him, that he would lose his friend. But this presented a real problem for him. Now, one night on the way home from school, and this is documented, an old man ran up to Calvin, and grabbed him and said something to this effect: "Boy, what are you going to do about your soul and Christ?" And Calvin immediately recognized that this was one of those gossipers. A gospeler, not a gossiper. Gossiper. Get my own self out of whack. But anyway, he didn't give it much thought. He thought about it a little bit, went back to his apartment, thought about it a little bit. Well, about a week later, very crazy here. A week later, Calvin noticed a large group gathered. So out of curiosity, he joined to see what, everybody goes, if you see a group gathered, everybody runs to see what's going on. Well, to his surprise, it was the same old man that was being burned as a heretic. Now, that was common in France. France was a heavily Catholic country. It was common for them to burn heretics. But yet, while this same man that made that statement to Calvin, he watched him burn at the stake. And while Calvin watched him burn, the old man sang this song that I'm fixing to show you. Now, conversely, on the right-hand side of your screen, the top, you're going to see a picture of a martyr. I don't know if this is the man, but this is a picture. Commonplace in the 1500s. Someone that was against the Catholic Church being burnt. The bottom picture is what's called the cross of the Huguenots. The Huguenots were the direct descendants of the Gospelers. The Huguenots lived about 50 to 75 to 100 years later, and were really the cutting edge of the Reformation when it come to trying to make change in the country, and they were persecuted and heavily afflicted. But so Calvin sees this man burn, and this man in all his trouble was singing this song here. You may recognize it. Hey, Roy, this song was written about a year before Calvin witnessed this. And I believe Johnny sang his song, "Oh, a mighty fortress is our God, a bulwark never failing. Our helper he amid the flood of mortal ills prevailing. For still our ancient foe doeth seek to work us woe. His craft and power are great, and armed with cruel hate, on earth is not his equal." Now, when Calvin saw this man singing this song, it had an impact on him. We can't dogmatically say that was the time of his conversion. But what Calvin later wrote was this: God, by a sudden conversion, subdued and brought my mind to a teachable frame. which was more hardened in such matters that might have been expected from one at my early period of life. Having thus received some taste and knowledge of true godliness, I was immediately inflamed with so intense a desire to make progress therein that although I did not altogether leave off other studies, yet I pursued them with less ardor. Being exceedingly alarmed at the misery to which I had befallen, and much more at that which threatened me in the view of eternal death, I, duty bound, made it my first business to betake myself your way, condemning my past life, not without groans and tears. And now, O Lord, what remains to a wretch like me, but instead of defense, earnestly to supplicate you not to judge that fearful abandonment of your word according to its deserts, from which in your wondrous goodness you have at last delivered me. Calvin recorded that in his commentary on the Psalms. So I put Calvin's conversion somewhere around 1533. And, it's interesting that the light of Scripture came to Calvin's life. Isn't that what we see over and over? We see it over and over. The more Scripture someone takes in, the more reformation they have. Now, John Calvin is going to be a 3-part, possibly a 4-part series. There's so much in his life because he was such a great man of the faith. But I want you to understand that Calvin was a man, and the truths that Calvin helped to reinvigorate had always been there. God's truth is always there. But as we study his life, I want you to see the effect of the Scripture on his life. And I want you to know, beloved, that same effect can come to your and my life too. We come to the Scripture and we don't mold the Scripture to our liking. We let the Scripture mold us to how the Lord would have us to be. Listen, I want to invite you to our New Salem in the book of Colossians tomorrow, Sunday at New Salem, and also all the festivities that will be on here at the cross. I want to thank you for joining me for this live version. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. You've been listening to Heroes of the Faith. I'm Brother Donnie. Thank you for your time. I pray God's blessings on you, and we'll see you next time.